Time to do it. Okay. The virtual meeting room is open.
Hi, everybody. Come on in.
Yes, we're waiting for you. Oh, wow. We picked up another registration as we were starting. That's funny.
All are welcome.
All are welcome. Yes. Yes. I'd be lying if I said that I haven't been one of those people at some point. Here you go. Folks are starting to come in. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to get started. We'll give it a couple minutes before we jump in. In the meantime, feel free to let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. We always love to see that. Drop that into the chat on the right side of your screen, please. This is also going to be a very interactive webinar. So yes, we have some content to review with you. We have some great tips that Allison's going to share, but we also want to hear from you. So a thank you to folks who submitted advanced questions. We'll be going through those at the end, but if you have questions as we're going through this conversation, please feel free to submit them at any time, and we will gladly respond to those as we go through the deck. So don't be shy. But in the meantime, let us know where you're from. Chicago. Amazing. That's one of my favorite cities.
Great
Welcome,
city.
Edward. Love it there. It's beautiful there this time of year, too. Instead of the swamp of DC where I'm living right now.
I have to say, I mean, we haven't had a great spring in the Northeast. It's been very rainy, but today is the perfect spring day, like
I love that.
73 degrees and sunny and breezy and just the kind of day you live for.
That's the best. We're in the 90s here in DC with who knows what kind of humidity. All I know is when I took my dog out, it was brutal. Ooh, Florida. Yeah, Lori. Yeah, Florida's pretty toasty this time of year.
Oh, and we have I feel like we've got the South, we've got the Southeast,
We've got it all.
The Northwest. Hey,
I love
Michelle.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, as people continue to pop in, why don't we go ahead and get started since we're 3 after. I'm a stickler for time, as folks will learn as we continue to do these. Flint, Michigan. Okay, I love that. I grew up in Detroit, so I know Flint very, very well. Love to see it. Now, welcome to our little fireside chat on melt prevention. I'm Angela from Halda here with my BFF, Allison, marketing extraordinaire and overall wonderful human. And we're going to talk to you about melt prevention today. So, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Yes, this webinar is being recorded. We get this question all the time, and I want to make sure that you know that you will receive this in your inbox tomorrow. Feel free to watch it on demand, pause it, rewind, all the things, share it with a friend, but that will be hitting your inboxes tomorrow. If you have a question or you want to contribute, as I mentioned, the Q&A and chat, which many of you have found, is on the right side of your screen. Please submit your questions as we go along. You do not have to wait until the end. We want to hear from you as we're getting through the content, so please feel free to do that. And as an added bonus, if you contribute, you will be entered to win a $10 gift card for coffee on Halda. So nice little incentive for you to drop some things into the Q&A and the chat for us. So here is a look at our agenda. We're going to talk about summer melt by the numbers, how you can spot some red flags early on, what AI can do for you when it comes to melt prevention, ways that you can customize outreach at scale. That is a typo. That should be 4, not 34. My apologies, everyone. How you can empower your team with automation, and then more Q&A at the end if we can get to it. So let's jump in. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here because I would love to see and hear from all of you what your biggest melt challenge is. The poll is launching right now. Let's just take a peek at what we get from folks. Don't be shy. It's anonymous. So no one will know it's you unless you want them to. Okay. And if you end up choosing other, we'd love to know what that other option is. So you can drop that in the chat if you are in the other category. Okay. So we've got a lot of folks dealing with financial barriers. Engagement gaps is catching up. Resource constraints, not too bad. Not too bad. Okay. Very interesting. The good news is we will touch on all of these. So we're here to help.
Yeah, I'm seeing, I mean, especially in the financial barriers, I feel like I've been around a long time in this industry, almost 20 years. And this melt season, tell me if I'm wrong, everyone, I have felt like there's been more scholarship offering post May 1st than I've ever seen before. And even from schools, I wouldn't expect to be doing that, especially late in the game, deep into May. I was seeing things like that. So I do think financial aid and cost has played a role, especially this season.
That's really interesting. And I'd love to hear from folks in the chat if that resonates, if that's something that you're also seeing, because as we all know, right, the finances are a really, really big barrier for a lot of students. And so if that is something that you're seeing too, feel free to drop a note in the chat for us. We want to hear from you. So now that we've talked about challenges, let's start taking a deeper dive into MELT by the numbers. Allison, do you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. So I think we all know, well, let's level set what MELT is so that we're all talking about the same topic. So MELT season is typically the summer season, but really it could be all of, it depends on how your enrollment cycle works. But a student has already confirmed, they've already deposited at your college, but then they don't show up for class. They don't actually show up and enroll in the end. We have this time period between when that deposit and that decision happens and actually either setting foot on campus or beginning taking those classes. And a lot can happen in that time period, including, as we were just talking about, other colleges coming out with things like scholarship offers or other kinds of incentives to have them switch their choice from your school to another school. And so colleges can lose from anywhere from 10 to 40% of their admitted students during this time period. And we've worked really hard to get that admitted student to confirm, right? We have worked our tails off to do that. So it's not just this risk and that this loss of student, it's also the ROI on our effort is less when they don't show up to actually start their enrollment. And we know that first-gen students and low-income students are disproportionately affected. They're more likely to not actually enroll in the college and to change their decision. And, there's a lot of interventions that we can all be taking, and AI can be helping us with them. And so that's what we're really going to talk about today, because we want to make sure that those students, they deposit and they make it all the way through. And we really have to put our helper hats on and put ourselves in the shoes of the students and the things that they need during this time period and really, really serve them well. And there's ways that AI can help us do that.
It's red flag time.
Yeah. Red flag. And so on the flip side, right? So what are those things that we can be looking for that help us know we should be worried about a particular student? The ones that aren't engaging, the ones who aren't answering. We just had a big virtual, we called it pre-orientation event last night, and more than half the class attended. Well, I got to look at that other half, right? Because is it because it was a night in June that they were just busy, which is absolutely possible. In New York State, we're still in school. So I know many of you you're already out of school for the year, but we're still in school. They haven't graduated yet. They still have spring sports. A lot is going on. But I've got to look. I've got to go through those students and see am I worried about them, right? And there's some signals that we can be looking for. When they don't send things like their final transcript, when they haven't accepted their financial aid in their portal, they haven't filled out the housing form or chosen a roommate, these are all signals that we need to be looking for to find out, again, who we want to be worried about. And then, as we just said, the poll answered it too. Financial concerns will come up because perhaps accepted, but at the moment didn't fully understand the cost to them. And now they're going to start getting bills. They might not have fully understood what it means to take out federal loans or need other loans. And again, other colleges could be putting more aggressive financial aid offers in front of them that makes them think, oh, look, I could go over here and it's a lot more cost effective for me. It's a lot more affordable. So it can help sort of make them change their mind. These are all things that are happening in the market and happening with the student that we need to be concerned about. So, and another thing is to look at, are they logging in, setting up payment plans, logging into the billing system? So these are all signals that we can be looking for to find out what students we really want to be getting in front of in an individual way, which is where I think AI can help.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that more. Yeah.
Great segue. Here's how it helps.
So I think there's all different ways that AI really can help us with the challenges around melt season. I mean, this idea of melt's not new, but we have new technology available to us. And, I always think it's funny because everyone thinks once we hit this period, we're coasting now. We're not busy. We're not stressed. No, we're just in a different season of stress, right? Well, there's some ways where we can serve students better and maybe even help save some time and some stress on our parts. And one thing is AI predicting melt before it happens. One of the things we can use AI tools for, when we have data on all of those engagement points that we have with students, some of them that I just mentioned on the previous slide, think of it this way. We can upload that data and from previous years and have AI help analyze what are the mixes of engagements or the missing engagement points that are most correlated with the student not actually enrolling. So we can have the data look at that. And now there's ones that we all know, especially if we've been in this industry for a while. We know that if they never visited, they're probably pretty risky, right? We know if they're a first generation student, that's a risk because this whole onboarding to college is very overwhelming, whether you're the first in the family or not, right? So we need to recognize those kinds of things. But it can help us point in the right direction. Because one of the challenges with melt is volume, pure volume. I need to talk to everybody? Even when I was talking about earlier about the video pre-orientation that we held yesterday, half of my income class is a lot of people to analyze, a lot of people to individual outreach. I've got to get to a smaller segment, the most likely to melt, so that I can really have effective communication with that individual student and individual family. So we have to be it can help us find those early warning signals if we're using past data, right? And then if we know from the past data and you load in the current data, well, now it can help find the students in that list. One thing I will say though is never upload the student's actual information. Okay. It shouldn't actually identify an individual student. Because AI will then know all of that information about the individual student. So you want to do it in an anonymized way that then you can pass back to your student ID for matching.
That's a great tip. Really huge.
And then the next way, so if you want to think about the first way is finding the at-risk audience. That's how AI can help. The second thing that can really happen is scaling individual outreach. So there's a lot of checklist type of things that happen over the summer, all the things that we need a student to do, which which is one of my pain points because I want to be engaging with a student. I want to be continuing to build relationship. I want them to get excited about going to college. I don't think anything says excitement like a math placement test that's mandatory to figure out what math class you're going to get placed in your freshman year, right? So, but how can we create communications in segmented ways and maybe even individual ways that make those communications more effective? Can we take what we've been sending to all students for years, perhaps, and can we ask ChatGPT or your preferred generative AI for recommendations? Like, put yourself in the seat of a parent or of a student and give me recommendations on how I could make this more clear. For instance, we might be using our higher ed jargon kind of language that and automatically thinking the students and parents will know. Another thing that it could really help with is sending the same message, but for different types of students. So for instance, you could speak to a group of students that lives near your campus, so perhaps has a much higher familiarity with your campus versus a student that lives 200 plus miles away, right? It's almost freeing when you can start talking to students in these ways. First generation students is another great example. Here's the information that has to go out, but can I do it in a way that's more personal and more relevant to them? International students. There are all these groups that we can serve better if we just tailor the content. And that's a big ask. It was, especially before we had generative AI, right? Because I could sit here and name 10 audiences. Now I need 10 versions of this same email, 10 versions of this same postcard we're sending. That's where AI can really help, right? Because you created the content, you've got the voice down, the information is accurate, and it's just helping on that segmentation piece of it. And that's where the scale really comes in. And you can see how those messages that are more personal and more relevant are going to be more effective. They're more likely to actually reach the student and get them the information they need and get them to do what we want them to do. So I want you to think of generative AI as you have a Melt intern. What are all the things that you would give an intern to do to help you connect with students and parents during this period?
I love that. And one call out that I do want to make that is something that we talk about a lot internally, but I do think it's an important point of distinction. And that's the difference between personalization and individualization. And, like personalization is the buzzword that everyone uses. And in some instances, it's still not quite hitting the mark in terms of really homing in on what an individual student is interested in, what their needs are, what the gaps are. And so, as you're thinking about the tools that you're using and how you're solving for some of these challenges, that's a really important distinction to look for, because it's that individualization that really kind of gets you over the hump, so to speak, as you're trying to solve for Melt and other issues.
And it's the hardest thing to scale.
Yeah.
To get to that one-to-one. I mean, the ideal scenario is you use the data to help point you to the students most at risk. And with those students, we're actually one-to-one. And you're sending communications that are so personal to that student. It's obvious they weren't just in a bulk email. I also think we're much more likely to hit their inbox and not a promotion
100%. Yes.
In that scenario. So the same idea applies. Instead of just saying, hey, what suggestions would you have for tailoring this message to a first generation audience? Instead, you tell it 5 things you know about that individual. Again, it does help speed it up. It's still, you're sending it one-to-one, but you haven't had to write it from scratch for each individual student either. It's a good solution. But you have to do both things. We have to get to an audience it's actually possible to do that with. And some people at smaller schools, you might be able to do this with you have a smaller number of students, and make it individualized. So that cross section of those two things is where we can really get to a better outcome.
Love that. So this is a big one, the time savings. Let's dig into that. And then we've got a few more pieces of content before we jump to questions. There were some really, really solid ones that came in. So I
Oh,
want to
yay,
make
I'm
sure that we
excited.
can get to those. Those are great.
I would love to hear all of your ideas for automating tasks that help free people up, because one of the things, so I'm going to add something. We'll call it a trifecta now. The first thing is having data that points you to the right audience. The second thing is having AI help you get to an individualized one-to-one communication. And third, the other thing that helps you scale that is having the people who are doing that communication, what other tasks do they do that can be freed up because they're using AI? So maybe it has nothing directly to do with Melt, right? So what I would do is actually go to the team and find out what they're working on. What are the pain points? What's dragging them down? What are they spending time on? And come up together with solutions for how generative AI might be able to speed that part up. The more we speed up those tasks, the more time we have for actually talking to students one-on-one, which I think is such a key goal in all of these. So I love any ideas that all of you have, but things like note-taking, things like meeting agendas, things like even admissions counselors this time of year are analyzing their travel data. Where did they travel? What were the results? AI can help with that data analysis as well, and provide some of the insights. So I think those are key points to really hone in on too.
I love that. And I love this question that we just got, because I definitely have some thoughts about this and it coming fresh off of the AI and college admissions special interest group from NACAC. Shout out to my friends over on LinkedIn and that group. They had a meeting yesterday and there was a lot of conversation about this. I definitely have some thoughts, but Allison, why don't you start and then we can kind of tag team Samantha's question.
I think it definitely depends on your task, right? That's part of it. But I lean more into ChatGPT. And the reason is because I've already built so many custom GPTs that I have all of these GPTs that I can just use and run. So I can be faster there than other places because it's just where I've built out all of this brand content and voice content and all of that. So that is my go-to generally. But another one that I really like for research purposes, so for instance, you might just be doing research on some of these audiences that we're talking about to understand them better, to be able to connect with them and personalize better. And Notebook LM is my favorite for research kind of activities. But I'd love to hear all of your ideas and what you use. What did you hear at the conference, Angela?
So it was interesting because I think this is actually where a lot of folks get stuck, because there are so many different tools. And so my personal recommendation is actually to go back to something that Allison said, which is to think about your use cases,
Yeah.
because there are different tools. Yes. Oh, +1 on Perplexity for research. I'm a huge, huge fan. Thank you, Michelle, for dropping that in. And kind of mapping it from there, because if you try to have a deep understanding of every single tool that exists, you're going to lose your mind. I mean, it's not possible. It's not possible. And so you really have to start with the problems that you're trying to solve and then map the tools to that. Same with if you're trying to implement generative AI within your team, start by thinking about the different use cases that you have on the team and then specifically seeking out the tools that map to that specifically. So we're seeing some things that are dropped in. Perplexity, yes, really great for research. You can also use ChatGPT for really baseline research. Claude is really great for things like creating templates and spreadsheets and documentation if you're trying to create planning documents. So there's a lot of different things out there, but don't feel pressured to understand everything, because you can't, and no one does. And once you get started, you're going to figure out, okay, these are the things that are really useful to me. And then you can just double down on really becoming an expert on those tools versus trying to figure everything else out. And yes, we're seeing Claude, Gemini, Copilot. Pro tip, if you are a Microsoft school, Copilot's great. It's baked in. If you're a Google school, Gemini and Notebook LM are actually free for you. So definitely take a look at that. Google Workspace opened that up for everybody in January. So it's a great opportunity to experiment with some things that you already have access to and don't need to, pay for another subscription.
And sometimes if you're not ready to figure out how to use it for work, try it for something personal in your life. So there's some fun
Yes.
ones that I like. Help it build travel plans. So if you say you're going to be in New York City and you've got 4 days and these are the types of activities and the people who are in your group, can you recommend a schedule for a tourist, right? It's actually pretty good at doing things like that, or a workout. I love to do, if I'm in a hotel gym, I'll put right in, here's the equipment that's in the hotel gym and I've got 30 minutes and I want to do a strength workout, tell these things and it'll put together a workout. You can try for personal things too and like inch your way in if you're one of the people who's not really all the way in yet. And then you start to get in the habit. So when you have a sticky point or a question, you start to realize AI can help with it. Yesterday I was doing some data analysis and there was something I was trying to get, a formula I was trying to write in Excel. And I was like, what am I missing here? Finally, I don't know why it took me so long, but I finally asked ChatGPT. I said what I'm trying to do, and it gave me the formula. I was like, oh my gosh, it would have saved me 10 minutes if I did that right off the bat. But you start to get in the habit. And again, speeding up those routine tasks helps us for the good stuff.
Absolutely. And quick Q&A over here. Question on whether we're going to be demoing any of Halda's tools. We are actually not. But if that is something that you're interested in, because, it's not a sales pitch, it's a conversation. But if you're interested in a demo, we can definitely make that option available to you later.
Or if
So,
anyone wants to talk about how a college actually uses it, I am happy to do that. And
Allison's your
actually,
girl.
yeah, and actually, Halda is actually a great example of an AI tool. We were really talking about generative AI at first, but Halda can be used as a really cool tool as well to sort of see who's engaged or not. On Siena's website, for instance, I've got a Halda form. Really, it's like a quiz from the student perspective. What kind of saint are you? And it gets you some really great information about the things the student is interested in. So if I put that in front of students, A, who did or did not engage is important. And two, the information that I know about the students now helps me reach out in that one-to-one way. The example I gave earlier about here's an email I send, but I want to individualize it for this student. Here's facts about them. Imagine being able to get the quiz results into those facts about that student. I mean, we are really talking about something that feels very personal by the time it gets sent to the student, if you're using tools like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Great example, Allison. Okay, so we talked a lot about this.
We keep getting ahead of ourselves. We're very excited.
We are. So this is more of a reiteration of some things that we've kind of talked about, but starting with things that you can use really easily, I think is super important. That is a great tip to start with your personal life before bringing it over into your professional life so that you know enough to be dangerous when you start bringing it over into the working world. Looking for platforms with proven success in higher ed is actually a big one as you think about bringing things over into your office or your team. There are a lot of tools out there, like I said, and there are some you'll probably see that claim that they can do it all for everybody. But having that knowledge of our industry, our space, what it's like on the other side of the desk is something that's going to be really important. We've certainly heard that from our partners who, have learned the hard way. That's really useful. And Allison, I'm sure you have some feedback on that too.
Absolutely. And a lot of this stuff is new. It's so new. So sometimes it's not fully proven yet. Right? Like Halda is a great example because you guys have been able to so quickly get to that proven aspect, but it still might be good. So I look for things like if they're offering me just like a 3-month trial instead of a 3-year contract. I mean, I think we're getting out of this world of partnerships in higher ed where we're signing contracts at 3-year clips because that seems risky now to me. That's more risky than signing on a short-term one because things are changing so fast. And if you are signing with a partner right now, and what if they don't keep up? with all of these trends. I saw a video from Tim O'Reilly, the CEO of O'Reilly Media, talking about how this is where we are with AI and generative AI right now is the beginning. We're not even at the end of the beginning yet. Because if you look at past technological revolutions and how those have gone, you can clearly see that this is just a start. So we have to find ways where we can test what works for our institutions, and that's where shorter term contracts, or if it's not working, either party can leave it at some point. We're going to have different types of flexibility around those kinds of agreements and testing out and talk to each other. We need to not be, we talk a lot about silos on our campuses, and sometimes we are siloed across institutions in ways we shouldn't be. We should share and not be so worried about stealing good ideas and stuff like that. We need to share. We all need to do a good job in this industry. We play a role in higher education perception, big time. We play a role in enrollment for higher ed and all that's happening around that. And we need to band together. And we need to be sharing insights with each other and not holding things close to the vest because we're trying to be competitive. No one's going to ever execute exactly the way you did. That's why I'm never scared of sharing out. Your institution's always going to have their way of doing it, but we've got to be collaborative around this stuff now more than ever.
No gatekeeping. That's a really, really great point. We have another really good question, actually, that just came in that I've heard before, and I think it's helpful for lots of folks who might be dealing with this. So the question is, I love using AI, but I have colleagues who are worried about the environmental impact. Any advice?
Yeah.
So, Allison, I don't know if you have something you want to share. I definitely have a few things that I think could be helpful as you're responding to these types of questions, but why don't you kick us off?
Well, I actually just did an AI for higher ed marketing and communications facilitation with a college last week. And that's something I do if anyone's interested in having me come in. And we had a lot of people in the room that had those thoughts too. But you know what we did? I didn't come in and preach about it or not. What we did is we reviewed things together. And we came up with possible guiding principles around the AI, use of AI within that team. I think that when we have different perspectives talking about a topic, we're all going to come out for the better. Right?
I love that.
Educating ourselves is really important. It's a tough topic because it absolutely does have an effect on the environment. It takes a lot of energy to run these things. It's also not going anywhere. It also has the potential to solve some of our climate change issues. So there's so many things on both ends of it. But some of the thinking on the individual side could be, okay, if we're going to do this, I'm not going to run 20 versions of this prompt. I'm going to get really good at having a custom GPT, so I don't have to do this 50 times. If we're doing it right, we can actually conserve energy. But these are things and voices that we need to have at the table, and we should be talking it through. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think, to Allison's point, as you're having these conversations, there's a lot of airtime around the negative environmental impact of AI, but nowhere nearly enough about some of the positive impacts. And so, there are some ways that AI is actually being used to solve for things like sustainable agriculture, conservation work, climate modeling, so that we can actually develop more accurate models and predict the impact of climate change. And then there are some businesses, it's not necessarily happening on a global scale yet, but some that are looking at energy efficiency, water management, sustainable sourcing. They are trying to reduce that footprint a little bit. And so I think the key there, especially if you're trying to justify the use of AI internally, is just to make sure that you're having a balanced conversation. And so, equipping yourself to be able to say, I totally hear you, but here are some good things that are actually happening. And because we know that this isn't going anywhere, this is something that has to be solved at some point on a broader level. And thank you, Allison, for sharing that. Yeah, exactly.
There's other ethics to have conversations with your team and think about yourself as well. So I am a strong believer that we shouldn't be originating creative work from generative AI. Definitely not if we're then going to share it as if we were the creator of it. But I'm a great proponent of creating something myself and asking for recommendations on what I might change based on this audience or things like that, or for proofreading reasons. I'm also a great proponent of upfront saying, asking for ideas on how to approach it before I write something, as one example of something we would create. That's my standard,
Yeah.
for myself, that I have thought through and we have discussed as a team, and that kind of thing. And when you get into visual and video, there's even other ethical things. Like, are we going to add a person to a photo? Are
Yeah.
we going to edit people's faces? These are discussions to have so that you can come up with those guideposts of where you're going to be. And I
Yes.
think have provocative scenarios. We have a scenario where there's an image of campus and we delete the people in the background. Would we do this or not? Just things like that, putting out the scenarios and talking them through, we're going to get to better answers.
Exactly. And that's where those answers are going to help you to develop your policy, right? For
Mhm.
how and if you're going to use AI in situations where you might want to have a disclosure, So that's another thing to think about is okay, if we're going to use it for these specific scenarios, how and are we going to disclose it? So those are all really healthy conversations to have and necessary conversations to have internally. Okay. So I think we've actually talked about some of these. So we're going to fast track to some things that you definitely want to consider. And we will include a copy of this deck in the recording. So no worries if we if we skip a few slides. We're having such a great side conversation that I want
Yeah.
to make sure that we balance the two. But these are just some things that you definitely want to take a look at as you're thinking about Melt over the course of the admission cycle. And now we have some advanced questions that we're going to try to get to. We had some great ones that came up in the Q&A. So thank you to everyone who's contributed so far. So this first one is, and we talked a little bit about this too, ethics considerations when using AI. This is a little bit more specific to engaging with prospective students. So Allison, why don't you kick us off?
I mean, the main thing is the one I already said, the privacy of information.
Yeah.
You have to be, I mean, sometimes we're just downloading queries and CSV files and things like that from our CRM, and we got to be really careful about what we're uploading into any of these kinds of sources. But again, there's these conversations on, am I going to have AI completely write an email to a student and send it from me? Something to me doesn't feel right about that personally. I would rather write something up or give a ton of context that's almost, has all of the content in it, and just have it, make it more concise, make it more clear, that sort of thing. Sort of what I do with when I teach at Siena too. So when I'm grading, I have all these thoughts as I'm going through a project, right? And I'm jotting down. Well, I have found that AI is a good helper in translating what I just wrote, my feedback, into something more clear for the student, right? Because I have all of these thoughts, and it's just really good. So I think they're getting higher quality feedback from me than they would have before. So those types of things. But yeah, I think these are conversations to have.
Yeah.
There's an artistic integrity, creative integrity, environmental, privacy. We've got to be considering all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Uh-oh, I went too fast. Slippery fingers. Okay, here we go. So we talked about a little bit about this too, some examples of AI-driven tools or platforms higher ed institutions can use to engage with students over the summer. We have a whole list that popped up over in the chat for some experimentation. We talked about Halda. Allison, is there anything else you recommend?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and who your audience is. One if it makes sense for your audience is the idea of the chat bot, right? Because the student can get served from a customer service perspective, perhaps really quickly over that kind of format. We have to, what's the solution that you're looking for? Because I think there's platforms and there's tools to help with all of those things, but you have to have real clarity around what the problem is that you're trying to solve, so that you're not just adding on the shiny new object, right?
I think that's a great point. And data, I always recommend this to folks, but there's a ton of data out there now around how students are interacting with AI, specifically through an admissions lens. So RNL's got some data, Niche has some data, lots of folks have some data out there. So that can help you develop a baseline understanding of what types of AI tools are actually resonating with students, because they don't actually like all of them. So that's actually a really important thing to pay attention to. Some of the noisier things, even like chatbots, are not necessarily doing it for the students. So that's something that I would really caution folks to pay attention to as well.
Well, then it makes me also want, there's a lot of talk about how students are going to be using or are using generative AI platforms to help with their college search. Well, the same thing's happening prepping for college. Yes. So I would pay close attention to this idea of zero-click search and the information that comes up about your college on things like Claude, on things like ChatGPT, when someone's asking questions about it. Is that information helpful? Is it valuable? Is it accurate? If it's not, where is it coming from? How can it be fixed? So we also have to think from that perspective, the ways they're trying to get information. It may or may not be them coming to the website, as an example. So they may or may not even get to the chat bot to get their answer. They might throw it in ChatGPT and say, hey, am I allowed to have string lights in my dorm room? That's a silly example, but this is going to become the natural place where people are searching for things, just like my example with the Excel formula, right? It's going to become the natural way of things, and we need to make sure the content about our schools and the information for incoming students is really solid, because it's so funny. Information gives them confidence.
Yeah.
Right? They don't like, not knowing is what leads to the anxiety. And we know that's an extra challenge with this generation right now. Not knowing. I mean, for myself, when I go to a restaurant I've never been to, I need to understand what the parking situation is going to be. But it's a small example, but people need to understand they need to be able to picture it for themselves. The unknown is scary, right? Fear of things unknown. And it's not necessarily you or your website they're going to be going to.
It's very true. And they're not necessarily starting with Google, and so that's Google is having an interesting time right now dealing with this migration to other platforms for search. And so, when you think about SEO, so to speak, it actually has expanded quite a bit in terms of your visibility with prospective students. So that's a really, really good call out. Okay. I think we talked a little bit about this one, but Allison, do you have anything that you want to add before we move on from this one?
Sorry, I just lost my speaker for about 20 seconds for some reason.
Oh, no.
Swap. Say that again. I don't know what happened. It said it actually switched my speaker to my microphone.
Oh my goodness.
I can't hear through my microphone. So please say that again. I don't know what happened.
The meeting is haunted. So we covered this a little bit, but I just wanted to see if you had anything to add. And this is actually our last advanced question before we wrap. So we can cover this. And if anyone has a final question that they want to drop into the Q&A, please do. Now is the time.
Who wants that final question? I want to know, because we're giving out the gift card. Don't forget. But I'm so glad someone asked this, because I meant to say it earlier. Oh my gosh, one of the things that I think is so powerful is to be putting our content into generative AI and asking for whether or not it's clear on things like financial aid, right? Like, use it as an let it be the parent for you. Right? Is it clear? Or what questions would someone what questions would someone have after this? Am I answering all of the questions? It's a really neutral party in that way, right? Like I'm invested in content that I have written in the past, and it's not invested in it. There's no pride of ownership. So I think that's one way to really help provide clarity and make sure we're addressing the concerns people might have, things that we might gloss over or skip over. It can check us on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's great. And that is, we did not get a last minute question.
Oh.
So I think everyone is all questioned out, but I love the engagement that we got in the chat today. Thank you to everyone who chimed in with a question, with their thoughts on the tools that they're using. Allison dropped her email address in the chat, and I will do the same in case you'd like to reach out to either of us. If you have more questions, want to keep the conversation going. As I mentioned, we are going to send the recording to you tomorrow, in addition to a copy of the slides and a couple of additional resources in case you want to take a deeper dive into this topic. So thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Allison, for sharing your brilliance with us. And we will see you at the next one.
Bye.